Ava, a young black woman in her late 20s, had just wrapped up a demanding shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The week had been exhausting, filled with long hours and little sleep. Still, she had promised herself to pick up a few groceries for the weekend before heading home. The sun was setting as she pulled into the crowded supermarket parking lot, the last rays of light casting an orange glow over the bustling scene. Cars maneuvered around each other in search of spaces, and the air buzzed with the sound of engines and conversations. Ava circled for several minutes before spotting an open spot near the entrance. With relief, she turned on her signal and parked carefully, making sure her car was centered between the lines. Just as she reached for her bag on the passenger seat, she heard the screeching of tires. A white sedan barreled into the spot next to hers, stopping mere inches away from her car. Startled, Ava froze. The driver's door flung open and out stepped a middle-aged white man, his face red and contorted with anger. His sharp voice cut through the noise of the parking lot. "That was my spot," he barked, pointing an accusatory finger at her. Ava turned to him, confused but calm. "I'm sorry, sir, but the spot was empty when I parked," she said politely, hoping to de-escalate the situation. But her attempt at diplomacy only seemed to inflame his anger. "You people think you can just take whatever you want," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. Ava's chest tightened. She had heard this phrase before, "you people," and she knew exactly what it meant. The man's frustration wasn't just about a parking spot, it was about her. Still, she tried to remain composed. "Sir, I didn't see anyone waiting. If I had, I wouldn't have taken the spot," she explained, her tone measured. His eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his presence looming. "Don't play dumb with me," he sneered. "You people never take responsibility for anything, always acting like you're entitled." The venom in his words struck a nerve, but Ava stood her ground. "I'm not here to argue with you," she said firmly. "Let's just move on." The man wasn't interested in moving on. He took another step forward, his finger jabbing toward her. "Who do you think you are talking to me like that?" he demanded, his voice growing louder. By now, people in the parking lot had started to notice the confrontation. Some paused to watch, their curious eyes adding to Ava's discomfort. She felt trapped, surrounded by judgment and hostility. "Please step back," she said, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "I don't want any trouble." But trouble was exactly what he wanted. Without warning, the man raised his hand and struck her across the face. The slap echoed across the parking lot, drawing gasps from the growing crowd. Ava stumbled back, her cheek stinging from the blow. For a moment, she was too stunned to react. The pain wasn't just physical. It was an attack on her dignity, a blatant display of disrespect fueled by prejudice. The man stood there, smirking, as if he had just taught her a lesson. But what he hadn't anticipated was Ava's response. Straightening her posture, Ava met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "You don't get to treat me like this," she said, her voice cold and sharp. Before he could react, she raised her hand and slapped him back, the sound as loud and decisive as his had been. The man staggered, his face a mask of shock and outrage. "How dare you!" he shouted, clutching his cheek. "You'll pay for this!" Ava stood her ground, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "No," she said firmly, "you'll pay for thinking you can intimidate me." By now, several onlookers had pulled out their phones, recording the altercation. The man's face twisted with fury as he realized the crowd wasn't on his side. Someone had already called the police, and the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. When the officers arrived, Ava calmly recounted the incident, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Several witnesses stepped forward to corroborate her story, and some even showed the officers their video recordings. The man, however, continued to shout, insisting that he was the victim. "She hit me!" he yelled, pointing at Ava. "I was defending myself!" But the evidence was clear. The officers examined the videos and the red mark on Ava's cheek, matching it to the moment he had slapped her. They placed the man in handcuffs, his protest growing weaker as the reality of the situation sank in. As he was led away, his hateful gaze lingered on Ava. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Ava watched him go, her emotions a whirlwind of relief, anger, and exhaustion. She knew this wasn't over. The legal process would be long, and she would likely have to relive the incident in court. But for now, she felt a small measure of justice. Later that evening, as she sat in her apartment, Ava reflected on what had happened. The sting of his words and the slap still lingered, but so did the satisfaction of standing up for herself. She knew that people like him wouldn't change overnight, and the fight against prejudice was far from over. But she also knew she wasn't alone. The support from the bystanders and the swift action of the police had shown her that there were allies in the fight for justice. Ava decided she wouldn't let this incident define her. Instead, it would strengthen her resolve to speak out against injustice, not just for herself but for others, who might not have the courage or opportunity to do so. As she prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror, her reflection radiating strength and determination. She wasn't just a victim, she was a fighter. If you liked this story, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.